AITA for ruining my family's holiday by revealing my dad's secret affair. Hey Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a long one, and honestly, I'm still trying to process everything that happened. I'm Alice to 5F, and my life feels like a soap opera that went off the rails during Christmas last year. I've always been close to my family, or at least I thought I was, but after what I did, I'm not sure if things will ever be the same again. To give you some background, my parents, Michael 53M and Karen 50F, have been married for over 30 years. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. My mom's the quintessential loving, warm-hearted person who dotes on everyone. My dad's always been the funny, charismatic type that people gravitate towards. I grew up thinking they had the perfect marriage, the kind of relationship everyone envies. But last year, right before Christmas, I found out that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. It all started when I noticed that my dad was acting differently. He's always been pretty involved with work. He's a partner at a big law firm, but over the past year, he'd started staying late at the office more often, attending work dinners, and traveling a lot more. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but then I started noticing how he was constantly on his phone, texting late into the night. One evening, I was visiting their house when I glanced over at his phone and saw a message from someone named Rebecca. The message read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing." I felt like someone had slapped me across the face. My heart was pounding, and for a moment, I thought I might throw up. I remember sitting there, staring at the phone, replaying the message over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it. My dad was having an affair, there was no doubt about it. I knew right then that my family was on the verge of being torn apart, and I wasn't sure what to do. For days, I tried to pretend that I hadn't seen the message. I told myself I was jumping to conclusions, that maybe there was some explanation, but the more I watched my dad, the more suspicious he seemed. He was always making excuses to leave the house, always glued to his phone, and my mom seemed completely unaware. That's when I decided to confide in my older brother, Liam to 9M. I thought he might have noticed something too. I called Liam and told him about the message I saw and how weird Dad had been acting, but Liam didn't believe me. He brushed it off, saying I was being paranoid and that Dad wouldn't cheat on Mom. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Liam and Dad have always been close, and I think part of him just didn't want to see what I was seeing. He told me to forget about it and focus on Christmas, but how could I? I couldn't see what I had seen. As Christmas approached, the tension in the air was suffocating, at least for me. Every year, my parents host a huge Christmas Eve dinner for the entire family. My aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, everyone comes over. My mom spends weeks planning the event, cooking up a storm, and decorating the house like something out of a holiday movie. But this year, I couldn't focus on any of it. I was constantly watching my dad, waiting for him to slip up again. On Christmas Eve, the day of the big dinner, my dad left the house in the afternoon, saying he had some last-minute shopping to do. I didn't believe him for a second. I had a sick feeling in my gut that he was meeting Rebecca. When he finally came back, hours later, he looked distracted and distant. My mom didn't seem to notice, or maybe she was just pretending not to see it, but I could barely look at him. As the family arrived, everything felt surreal. My dad was playing the role of the perfect host, pouring drinks, cracking jokes, and acting like nothing was wrong. I could barely stand to be in the same room as him. My mom was her usual cheerful self, but there was something off about her too. She seemed more tired than usual, and I wondered if she knew. Maybe she was in denial, or maybe she was waiting for the right moment to confront him. Either way, I felt like I was living in a house of cards, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. During dinner, I could hardly eat. I kept glancing over at my dad, wondering how he could sit there, acting like everything was fine, when he was cheating on my mom. My mind was racing. Should I say something? Should I confront him privately? Should I wait until after the holidays? I didn't want to ruin Christmas, but I also couldn't let my mom go on believing that everything was fine. It felt like I was being crushed under the weight of this terrible secret. At one point, my dad excused himself to go to the kitchen, and I followed him. I couldn't take it anymore. I cornered him and said, "I know about Rebecca. I saw the texts." His face went white, and for a moment, he just stared at me, speechless. Then he tried to deny it, saying I had misunderstood, that Rebecca was just a friend from work. But I wasn't buying it. I told him I had seen enough to know what was going on, and he needed to come clean. He begged me not to say anything. He said it wasn't what I thought, that he loved my mom, and he was going to end things with Rebecca. He even swore that it was over, but I knew he was lying. I told him that if he didn't tell Mom, I would. That's when he snapped. He got angry, saying I had no right to interfere in his personal life, that I was making things worse by getting involved. I was furious. How could he be more worried about keeping his secret than the damage he was doing to our family? We went back to the dining room, and I was shaking. My mom was sitting there, laughing with my aunts, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband was cheating on her. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, and in front of everyone I said, "Mom, Dad's been cheating on you." The words just tumbled out of me before I could stop them. The room went dead silent. My mom stared at me like she didn't understand what I had just said. My dad froze, his face pale as a ghost. For a moment, no one said anything. The silence was suffocating. Then my mom stood up, her face blank, and walked out of the room. My dad tried to go after her, but she slammed the door behind her. The rest of the family just sat there, staring at me in shock. My brother looked like he was going to explode. He pulled me aside and started yelling at me, saying I had no right to blow up the family like that, especially on Christmas. He said I had ruined everything. The rest of the night was a blur. My mom didn't come back, and my dad spent the rest of the evening locked in his office. The family slowly started leaving, one by one, until it was just me, Liam, and the wreckage of what had once been a happy Christmas dinner. Liam was furious with me. He said I should have kept quiet, that I had ruined Christmas for no reason. But how could I sit there and watch my mom be lied to? How could I pretend everything was fine when it wasn't? The next morning, Christmas Day, was even worse. My mom didn't come home. She stayed at a hotel, and my dad was a mess. He was pacing around the house, trying to call her, but she wasn't answering. Liam barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was with cold, angry words. The house felt empty, like all the joy had been sucked out of it. There were no presents, no Christmas breakfast, just the aftermath of the bomb I had dropped. A week later, my mom filed for separation. My dad moved out of the house, and our family hasn't been the same since. My brother barely speaks to me, and when he does, it's filled with resentment. He blames me for tearing the family apart. My dad has tried to reach out, but I can't even look at him. I can't forgive him for what he did to my mom, and I can't forgive myself for being the one to expose it. The thing is, I don't regret telling my mom the truth. She deserved to know, but I do regret the way it all went down. Maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe I should have waited until after the holidays. But at the time, I felt like I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I'm not so sure. Since then, the family has been completely fractured. My mom moved in with my aunt, and she's trying to figure out what to do next. She hasn't spoken to my dad since that night, and she's barely spoken to me. I think part of her blames me for how everything came out, even though I was just trying to help. My dad is living in a small apartment across town, and I haven't seen him since he left. He's been trying to reach out, but I don't know if I'm ready to forgive him. As for Liam, our relationship has never been the same. He's furious with me for ruining the family, and he's made it clear that he thinks I was out of line. We used to be close, but now he barely acknowledges me when we're in the same room. He's sided with my dad, and I can't help but feel like I've lost both of them. I thought the truth would set us free, but all it did was destroy everything I once held dear. It's been months now, and I still don't know if I did the right thing. My mom is heartbroken, my dad is miserable, and my brother hates me. I feel like I've lost my entire family, and I'm left wondering if things would have been better if I had just kept quiet. But then I remember that my dad was the one who lied, who cheated, who tore our family apart. I just brought the truth to light, but the truth, as it turns out, can be devastating. So, Reddit, AITA for ruining my family's holiday by revealing my dad's affair. Should I have kept the secret, or was I right to expose him, even if it meant destroying Christmas for everyone?